Interesting developments coming in as far as the war is concerned. We're now learning that Russian President Vladimir Putin has recently visited a military command post to receive briefings from his top military commanders. You can see the visuals on your screens over there. These briefings reportedly focused on recent military gains in Ukraine, as the Kremlin puts it. In the meeting, Putin was informed about the capture of Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region. Moreover, a chief of Russia's general staff, Valery, has now provided additional details on military advances. According to him, Russian forces in the north have finished, quote-unquote, liberating Vovchansk and have taken control of 3 other settlements in the Sumy and Kharkiv regions. Listen in.
Север сегодня завершила освобождение города Волчанск. Кроме того, в рамках создания полосы безопасности в приграничных районах Сумской и Харьковской областей Украины в ноябре под наш контроль на этой территории перешли еще 3 населенных пункта. Это Синельниково, Цегельное и Двуречанск. Войска группировки «Центр» освободили город Красноармейск и продолжают уничтожение подразделений противника в Димитрове. Кроме того, часть сил группировки успешно развивает наступление в Днепропетровской области.
Now, the Russian president has emphasized that taking control of Pokrovsk would support ongoing offensive operations against Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian officials have not confirmed the claims being made by the Russians yet. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Matthew Wadham. Interesting developments, because we'd seen the Russians earlier as well, a couple of weeks back claimed that they had encircled Pokrovsk. They're reiterating this claim as of now. Pokrovsk, we know, is a very, very crucial logistics hub for the Ukrainians. If captured, what does this mean for Ukraine? How much of a setback is it? And if not, why would the Russians then bluff?
Well, Russian dictators are notorious liars, so I don't think that we should take anything that they say at face value. Now, that doesn't mean they're lying here. Maybe they did overrun Pokrovsk, and if that's how you pronounce it. My pronunciation of Ukrainian and Russian place names is not very good. Anyway, the if it happened, you know, it's not good for Ukraine, and it's going to be quite demoralizing, and it's not helpful in terms of Ukraine's defense against Russia. But you know, maybe we need to wait and see if it actually has happened. There must be some independent parties, like, you know, the U.S. could verify whether it's happened or not with its massive satellite network. So I don't know why that hasn't happened yet. Maybe it's too new a development and they haven't released any data, any reports on it yet. But yeah, if this is if Russia's won control of that territory, then that's it's not a good thing for Ukraine. It doesn't mean it's the end, but it's you know, losing a major place of strategic importance is not helpful to their cause. But I think we have to wait and see if it actually did happen. Now, how is this going to affect, you know, the peace talks between the two countries? If you know, Russia could be just saying it to try and gain you know, an upper hand, to try and force Ukrainians to agree to things they wouldn't otherwise agree. So, you know, you have to wonder, is Russia speaking factually, or is it speaking aspirationally? Is it just sort of projecting what it wants to happen? And, you know, sitting here, you know, in the Washington, D.C. region, I really can't tell you what the answer to that question is.
Indeed, as you've pointed out, the timing of this particular announcement is very interesting because negotiations are underway. Of course, we've also learned that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are slated to meet Vladimir Putin sometime this week as well. So with that, I'd like to thank you for taking our time, of course, sharing your perspective, your insights on all these very, very crucial developments. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus away from the war in Europe towards what's happening as far as Honduras is concerned. We're now learning that the Honduran presidential candidates Nasri Asfura and Salvador Nasrallah are virtually tied in the election vote count, each holding just under 40% in a neck-to-neck race, which has been plagued by technical problems with the electoral results website. Now, the National Electoral Council in Honduras, its website is shown as Asfura, the conservative National Party candidate who's been backed by US President Donald Trump, is leading over Liberal Party candidate Nasrallah by only 515 votes. These were the results that were posted around midday. However, the exact number of votes counted remains unclear due to ongoing issues with the electoral portal, which was down for extended periods throughout the day. Let's in fact take a look at what Asfura had to say.
Yo quiero que quedemos claros aquí. Ante mi seriedad, yo no vengo a hacer ninguna proclamación. Solo vengo a decir, tengamos paciencia, todo el pueblo hondureño, el CNE que termine de hacer su trabajo y nos vamos a dar cuenta de la realidad. Entonces, nosotros con toda la información que tenemos del CNE, con esa propia información, los números son distintos a lo que hoy se está saliendo en pantalla, porque nosotros lo llevamos mucho más adelantado con el informe del CNE. Gracias, con el informe del CNE. Pero también tenemos ese gran soporte de nuestro equipo, de nuestras actas, de la estructura que montamos previniendo este tema como lo estamos viviendo en este preciso momento.
All right, there, viewers, we've heard what was stated. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has emphasized that it appears that Honduras is trying to change the results of their presidential election, alleging that the country's election commission prematurely stopped counting votes. With us on the broadcast is Ms. Irina Sukerman, senior journalist, joining us from New York. Thank you so much for taking out time and speaking to us on NewsX World. It does seem that there's been a considerable blow that has been dealt to the ruling leftist party and its candidate, Rixi Moncada. She's nowhere to have been featured over here. The race is practically between Nasri Asfura, who's been backed by Donald Trump, and Salvador Nasrallah. Nasrallah is the centrist liberal candidate, and Asfura, of course, the conservative right-wing leaning candidate. There was also a wild card thrown in between by, the pardon granted by Donald Trump to the former president of Honduras as well, Juan Orlando Hernandez. What do you make of one, the results freezing midday and the portal not really moving about, and Donald Trump's keen interest in the outcome?
Well, a lot of it shouldn't come as a surprise. First of all, Trump's statements themselves kind of had an impact in a very highly polarized environment. But on top of that, you have technical issues with the Election Commission results website, delays in voter tallying, and all of that contributing to public distrust, political tensions, and then you have Trump literally meddling in an election and in favor of one of the candidates, but also threatening on his social media account that if the vote counting process is mishandled or changed, they would be held to pay, as he said. What that means, nobody knows, presumably sanctions and some sort of political and economic pressure. The vote was already very close, and these technical issues have contributed to this chaotic environment. There's multiple accusations from all sides of possible vote manipulation, possible fraud, or improper interference, including accusing Trump of foreign influence, always a huge factor in Latin American elections. So regardless of what ends up happening, legitimacy is very likely to be contested both politically and socially. So far, there is no claim that either side has full control over the result in any definitive way. But there is something taking place on the background, which is that at the same time as this election taking place, Trump vowed to pardon the ex-Honduras president serving 45 years in prison for alleged drug trafficking,
Yes.
and essentially granting that pardon would strengthen Asfour's faction indirectly by essentially helping his helping the faction affiliated with him in terms of credibility and so forth. Now, Trump has been paying close attention to this election for one of the reasons being that his entire national security posture has shifted towards the Western Hemisphere. Therefore, the U.S. foreign policy apparatus is now being regeared towards paying much closer attention to Latin American elections and developments, especially anything regarding a potential win for conservative candidates who could be considered political allies of Trump. And of course, drug trafficking issue, ironically, has taken a huge spotlight given the Trump's attacks on the alleged Venezuelan cartels, while at the same time pardoning a president who is serving time for his ties to drug trafficking.
Absolutely, ma'am. You have put it into context, of course. We have seen the regime in Honduras forging close ties with Cuba and Venezuela. It has trade relations with the United States and Donald Trump as well. How exactly with the change from the Labour Party to whoever comes into power will impact the equation with the US remains to be seen. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time, of course, sharing all that background with our viewers, and of course, in simple and lucid terms. On that note, we should focus towards what's taking place as far as Taiwanese president is concerned. Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te, while addressing the army reservists in the northeastern county of Yunnan, has stated that there's no room for compromise when it comes to Taiwan's security. Meanwhile, freedom and democracy are core to foundational values that have nothing to do with ideological disputes. Lai last week announced a $40 billion supplementary defense budget to underscore Taiwan's determination to defend itself against rising military threats from China, which claims that the democratically governed island is its own territory. Lai has also emphasized that in the face of China's coercion and harassment, the government had to spend more on its defenses and preparations against foreign threats. Taiwan's government has announced a reform of the training of its reserve forces, including doubling down on combat and shooting exercises, and in fact extended compulsory military service to 1 year from the previous 4 months as well. These are decisions that have been in place for the last 4 years. Meanwhile, with us on the broadcast is Dr. Asta Chadda from the Ritsumeikan University. She's an associate professor of international relations, joining us from Kyoto in Japan. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Interesting developments. We've also recently seen Taiwan try to acquire Israeli technology in order to protect its civilian infrastructure. It's sort of separated its new ambitions from its conventional military security apparatus, and also focused on its own airports, its ports as well, because of the increasing Chinese presence, the increasing incursions into the median line as well. What do you make of this $40 billion boost to the defense apparatus of Taiwan, and considering the fact that we have seen tensions boiling in this region between China and Japan as well, where do you see all of this heading to next?
Well, I mean, the President Chai Ing-lei's, his statement and the fact that they're trying to be very unambiguous this time with regards to Taiwanese security does shed light on twofold objectives that they want to achieve. One is clearly the fact that they're centralizing Taiwanese sovereignty, which is, according to them, non-negotiable, right? So this is the strategic, unambiguous sort of statement that they're making, specifically with regard to the centralization of defense in this whole, sort of brewing conflict. And this increased budget shows that this is no longer just about conventional defense. They're going to be targeting in some way the strengthening of their capabilities towards asymmetric warfare. They're trying to look at this issue as a whole of society defense issue and not just a border issue per se or a maritime issue per se. And then on the other hand is the fact that, as you mentioned, there are statements by the other world leaders, including those by Japan, where they have linked the Taiwanese security in some way to the Japanese security, or the fact that this could lead to some sort of a conflict escalation in the region. So what this does is, this overall, from a Taiwanese perspective, this requires Taiwan to heighten its deterrence at the same time by responding in some way to this increased risk. So what they seem to be doing is, now they seem to be more empowered in that sense to be explicitly rejecting any compromise, when it comes to a third-party mediation, trying to talk about a peace talk. And what they're saying is that the stakes of this conflict have already increased. And so as to do that, they need to prepare Taiwan, according to this statement, to potentially lead to sort of this way, such as, because they're factoring in the fact that probably Beijing already has the capabilities to engage in a military gray zone sort of a coercion tactic. So Taiwan needs to step up its own capabilities, not just purely in terms of defense, but overall in terms of strengthening their claims of sovereignty and their claims of freedom, which they hold to be central to this whole Taiwan issue. And that seems to address not just anxieties that exist in Taiwan, but they also seem to be in some way responding to the comments by Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, as well as in a way to signal to the United States what exactly is the Taiwanese stance, both politically, in terms of defense capabilities, also in terms of boosting their domestic morale with regard to this worsening situation in the Taiwanese Straits.
Absolutely, and the signaling to the US is a very interesting point you've raised there, ma'am, because despite the defense deals, we have seen the US is trying to, Trump especially is trying to push the G2 agenda with Beijing, and the apparatus in the United States has been rather cold towards the Taiwanese so far. I have run out of time, therefore I'd like to thank you for taking out time, of course, putting that into perspective for our viewers. But one last piece of information we're tracking on the broadcast. Thousands of people are rallying in the Bulgarian capital Sofia and several other cities protesting against the 2026 budget plan. Protesters want the government to stick with its promise to withdraw the 2026 budget. Some have even clashed with police, who've cordoned off offices of the ruling parties and pelted officers with rocks, bottles and firecrackers. Opposition parties and other organizations say that they are protesting against the government's plan to hike social security contributions and taxes on dividends to finance higher spending as well as state corruption. Listen in to what the former Prime Minister of Bulgaria had to say.
So there are two main reasons. So one of them is that people really fed up with the lies. And there were a number of lies that were related to the budget that we discussed today. And the second reason is that people that govern today, they're characterized with a lot of arrogance, with a lot of brutal force that they use to impose their views, including the budget, but not only the budget. So the people are really fed up with this, and they want to say stop. This will not work in this way.
All right.